Well, hi, I'm Rebecca Richter. I'm the Executive Director of the Missoula Urban Demonstration Project, otherwise known as MUD. And we are a nonprofit organization that provides resources and education for sustainable living in Missoula. And what I mean by sustainable living is sustaining our environment and our society for many generations to come. Our parent organization was the Down Home Project, and they started in about the late 1970s, teaching self-reliant living, such as basic carpentry skills, chicken raising, gardening, and that sort of thing. And one of the programs they started, because they recognized a need for seed saving and developing a seed network in Montana, they started Garden City Seeds, which a lot of you might know about and you might use their seed in your gardens. And we have with us here today Bill McDorman, who is co-founder of the Down Home Project and Garden City Seeds. And we're so happy to have him here with us today. He also founded a seed company in Ketchum, Idaho in 1984 called High Altitude Gardens. He's going to be sharing with us today some practical seed saving skills, and he's going to help us brainstorm about how to set up a network here in Montana. So I'd like to introduce Bill McDorman. Welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm not familiar with the skill levels or really the interests of the people sitting here in front of me that all look healthy and bright and interested. And so what I think I'll do, especially for the camera, is just give you a little bit of a background of why I got into this, what I started out to do, and why, of all things, I'm back here over 25 years later doing essentially the same thing. Some people want to start the Montana Seed Savers Network, which is essentially what we were trying to do with Garden City Seeds in the late 70s. And Garden City is no longer located here, and so there's an opportunity to actually start over and do the same thing again. And as I was thinking about coming here, that really set me back a bit. I mean, to think that I'm coming back to the same place, the same organization, and trying to do exactly the same thing 25 years later, I think points out how big these problems are and how important they are and how much dedication it's going to take all of us in trying to actually get a handle on them. I mean, there have been a tremendous amount of things done in the last 25 years as far as genetic diversity in agriculture. But Western Montana still doesn't have what we tried to do, which is its own seed company. And so let me tell you a little bit of the thinking that was involved when we got started, when I was here in college in the late 70s. We were waking up to the fact that agriculture, industrial agriculture as we know it, and especially in a colony like Montana is, outside the centers of real food production, was almost totally reliant on outside food. I think in America, the average bite of food travels 1,300 miles from where it's grown to where it's actually consumed. And that's actually gone up. Those are 10-year-old figures. And so if you want to live in Western Montana for a long time, generations, it seemed to make sense to us that we had our own agriculture. Somehow we're going to have an agriculture that's not based on fossil fuels, because those are going to become scarce. And we could see that 25 years ago. And it was going to get more expensive. It may even get disrupted. And so we were thinking about that seriously. And if you want to have your own agriculture, it became apparent when we started doing research is that you needed your own genetic diversity to sustain that agriculture. In other words, an ecosystem is only as strong as it is diverse. That's something that I learned in one of the first environmental studies classes that Ron Erickson was started when he branched out of the chemistry department here and started the environmental studies department. You know, the strength of any ecosystem is a function of its diversity. So if we have our own agriculture here and we're only going 3 or 4 different varieties of things or crops, it in the end would be essentially prone to disruption itself. And so as we were thinking, we thought, wow, if we really think this thing through, we're going to need access to lots of different kinds of things and lots of different varieties of the crops that we are growing. And we were learning about the centralization of the seed industry at the time. Almost every seed company in the world was being purchased at the time by a pharmaceutical or a chemical company. And we're left today in the 90s or late 90s, early 21st century with 5 or 6 companies now that own and control almost all the planet's seeds. And what was happening, this trend that we could see then that's still happening, is that these large corporations are doing what good corporations do. They're trying to maximize their profits. And they do that by getting rid of products that don't sell as much. Focus on big markets, products that sell a lot. Well, in seeds, that means get rid of all the diversity. And so hundreds and hundreds of small family companies that were all over North America that had varieties that were adapted to their climate and different disease resistances were all of a sudden owned by the same company, and they were throwing all those varieties away. And so if you lived in Montana and you were involved in agriculture in the late 70s, we were seeing that maybe only 3 varieties of wheat or 4 were being offered to the wheat farmers here, for instance. Whereas if you go to the Genetic Center for Wheat in Turkey, originally there were tens of thousands of varieties of wheat available. And that diversity got them through droughts and got them through any sort of pest infestations or whatever. And so we thought, wow, all this stuff's disappearing. We should start going around quickly and find what will work in Montana and keep that alive and keep it available so that as we develop in agriculture someday, we've got the stuff that we're going to need. And so that was the basic idea that started Garden City Seeds. And it was a real simple one, and it was really rewarding because we started finding things on the north side of Missoula, right next to where the Down Home Project in Mud is still located, that were old heirloom varieties of vegetables that were brought here by the Italian, what I call the original railroad families that helped settle Missoula and build the north side, that weren't available commercially anymore. And that was sort of became the impetus behind starting Garden City Seeds. It's like, wow, Uncle Vic says, I've got a variety of turnip here that you can't buy anymore, that we used to grow all the time, that actually works better here than anything you'll find in the catalogs. And we're going, great, that's what we're looking for. And so we slowly but surely started this little seed company without really knowing what we were doing. And little did we know, actually, at the time, that all across the United States, the same thing was happening. America's a great country for that. As we started to lose the small regional companies, new ones started up almost everywhere. And within a 3 or 4 year period, Johnny Selected Seeds was started in the Northeast. Abundant Life Seed Foundation was started in Port Townsend, Washington. Southeast Seed Exchange was started in Atlanta, Georgia. And it was all around the same idea, that these big companies were great, and they were doing, the huge business in seeds, but they really didn't have anything to sell us anymore. Nothing was for Montana. You could buy the same variety of watermelon or tomato, say, in Florida from these companies as you could in Montana. It was one size fits all in a big corporate marketing campaign. And we wanted to find the stuff that worked better for us here. And we wanted to do that with varieties that were what we called at the time, and still do, open pollinated or non-hybrid. And if you use open pollinated varieties, they breed true so that you can save your own seeds. So we had a 2-part mission, not only to find the diversity if we could, but then to teach each customer that we had how to save their own seeds so that they could engender and keep alive this diversity. And so that was the adventure that we started off on. And, it was a big new thing, and we got all sorts of publicity about it. Wow, a new seed company in Missoula. And I kept trying to punch through the picture that I had about the whole thing, and that was that we really weren't doing anything new. That actually what we were doing is very, very old. Since the glaciers receded and the dam broke right here in Glacier Lake, Missoula, right, drained out of the valley here, and agriculture, as we know, human agriculture as we know it now, first got started 10,000 years ago. That's basically the ritual that got started then, that we were starting to replicate again. And that is, grow a crop in your area, and if it works and you like what it gives you, save the seeds from it and plant it again the next year. It's a real simple ritual. Grow something, save the seeds, grow it again. And as you grow it, look for plants that actually are disease resistant or are bigger or taste better or work best for your microclimate. And if you'll do that, then you'll get genetic material, so to speak, that's yours, that works better where you are than anything else you can buy anywhere in the world. And that ritual started 10,000 years ago. And it's actually responsible, if you think about it, for not only agriculture as we know it, but human culture. That gave rise to villages, surplus human energy. That gave rise to the cities. And everything we know in the Western civilization came out of that process. It was all based on people figuring out how to save seeds from the things they liked and passing them on to the next people and the next generation so that they would have these treasures that would allow them to have a stable, long-term agriculture and therefore culture in their region. And so, we felt really good about what we were doing. And it's like, wow, this is really exciting. And over the years since I've been doing this, after I started Garden City Seeds and we got it going, I left after 3 years. Frankly, I was burned out. And I left my home here where Mud is still located, and we ended up selling it to them and the nonprofit or whatever. And I moved back home to Ketchum, Idaho, where I'd grown up, which is 6,000 feet in the mountains of central Idaho, and started another seed company that focused on people that live in really high cold places, that sort of ecosystem. And because I figured we need these everywhere. If we're going to be in the Mountain West again, and then we really want to live here for a long time, that's what we're going to have to do. And so that's how I left here, and I've been doing that ever since. I've been in the seed business ever since. But that magic, and this is just one of the things I want to emphasize to everybody here, because I feel like it's the gift that I discovered at the core of this whole thing that I want to pass on to you. And that is that when you take part personally in this ritual, something magical happens. And I've seen this happen to thousands of people now over the last 25 years. I've been doing seed workshops ever since then. And I get cards and letters. I get seeds from people now from all over the world that got the idea that and the permission to actually grow and save their own seeds. Maybe happened through something I was saying, or they heard about it just before, but it got lit up again in a workshop that I taught. And it changed their lives. And that's what I want to pass on to you. If you think about what you're here for, what is most meaningful that you're going to do with your life here in this region of the world, and with all the turmoil and all the uncertainty that we have? Taking part in a ritual that is as durable as one that's 10,000 years old, and making sure that people will have a stable place to live and food to eat is really quite an extraordinary thing to discover, I think. I've moved recently to northern Arizona, and I'm living in the Red Rock country, just below the Mogollon Rim. And it's really interesting because that's the furthest south that the glaciers came in the last ice age. And right down below where those glaciers came on the Colorado Plateau are red rock cliffs that stretch all the way across Colorado and into northern Arizona. And right at the base of those are evidence of humans living here 12,000 years ago, 10, 11, 12,000 years ago. The pictographs are there. The ruins are there, the Anasazi. And when I gave a seed workshop there the other day, I thought of something, and it was really profound to me, and I really meant it, is that if the people there start picking up with this activity again of growing and saving their own seeds and passing them on, they're actually doing the most important work by human beings in that area since the old ones, the Anasazi, were there 12,000 years ago. I mean, their civilization left because, most likely now they think because of drought. Their agriculture wasn't durable enough. But we have enough new things to help us, I think, that if we can redesign durability into our agriculture and re-regionalize it, then I think we have a real chance to survive all of this uncertainty. And one other thing that I like to add at this point is that, I don't see myself as one of those fear-based marketers. The world's going to fall apart, and you have to do this. I don't want to scare anyone into this activity. I think you should do it because it's the most magical thing that you'll do. It's a way, if you say save cantaloupe seeds, as my friend Dima did in Siberia. I went to Siberia in 1989 to find what kinds of seeds were still available for cold climates. I went behind the Iron Curtain, At that point, our corporations had been all over the world, and we had already trashed a lot of the diversity. We went into places like Central America and said, throw away that old corn and all that diversity. We have a new hybrid variety here that will double your yields. All you have to do is spray our fertilizers, use our herbicides, plant our new super hybrid, and you will be rich, right? And so they did that with virtually every kind of vegetable and cereal crop you can think of, almost everywhere in the world. We called it the Green Revolution. And I went to Siberia in 1989, which was still the Soviet Union, because I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to get beyond. And I realized that the Soviet bloc didn't allow all that exploitation and all this new stuff in, and that there may be some old varieties still there. And there was tremendous amounts of them. And I met a young man. He was a chemistry professor in a town called Novosibirsk there, Dima, and he was growing watermelons and cantaloupes. And I'd heard about him, and I went to find him, and I asked one of the officials at the Institute of Horticulture in Siberia, in Brno, if it was possible to grow watermelons and cantaloupes in Siberia, because obviously that would be great, a real cold climate thing for Montana, it'd be really fabulous. And they said, no, not possible. This is Siberia. Bill, it's 60 below zero, They did, no way. But I'd heard this rumor. So we finally tracked this guy down in his dacha garden, and I went out there, and there they were. They were about a kilo each, and he had a whole row, several rows, and they were all labeled, and they were all set up for him to save seeds from these things. And I go, Dima, how'd you do it? And he said, well, 12 years ago, I asked a scientist from America that was coming to bring me some seeds from watermelons and cantaloupe. And I planted them, and they didn't work. And I tried again the next year. And I finally, the second year, I got one watermelon that was about as big as a golf ball to grow. And it matured enough. I picked it green, and we brought it in, and it matured enough, and there were 2 seeds in it. So I saved them, and I planted them the next year. And lo and behold, the next year, I got a couple of the golf balls, and one a little bit bigger. And I saved the seeds from those. And he just kept this process, softballs, after 6 or 8 years, and finally got one a little bit bigger. He selected genetic material that was adapted to his microclimate. And when I got there, kilos, right? And he named these after his daughter, right? I mean, if you think about an activity for Americans to get involved in, a meaningful activity that you can pass on to the generations and make your mark on things, pass on a food crop that doesn't grow in your area, that no one said they thought was possible, because you did the simple work of this 10,000-year-old ritual. I mean, that's an amazing thing to me, and that's the excitement involved in what we're doing. And so I just want to pass that on. This is a positive activity. Not only are you doing something for tomorrow, not only do you now have the ability to take the best of what you grow in your garden, which is what we all want to do every year. If you're in a neighborhood of gardens, everybody wants the first tomato, right? And everybody wants the biggest watermelon, or everybody wants the tallest and best corn, or the first corn by the 4th of July. We naturally compete. And even in the Soviet Union, the competition was intense. In the so-called socialist country, that's where they competed. Everybody wanted the best, right? If you really want to do that and compete, take the best of what's in your garden and plant it the next year. And you can do that if you use open pollinated seeds, and you learn a little bit about the simplicity it takes, the simple methods it takes to save the seeds. And you can take the best of that year into the next year, the way Dima did, and actually transform what you're doing in your yard. And then the other, the final reason to really do this is that you get better food. It tastes better, and when we talk about how impossible that people think it's going to be for us to get rid of industrial agriculture as we know it. And the more I learn about this, the more I am sure that we're going to have to do this. It is the single most destructive thing on the planet. It ruins more soil, pollutes more groundwater, causes more cancer than any other single group of activities that humans are involved in. It's responsible, we're just listening to Collapse, Jared Diamond's new book. The collapse of civilizations, wrong-headed centralized agriculture is what caused the collapse of so many civilizations, and in a petrochemically based agriculture, we may be poised on the edge of that. And I think that's why he wrote this book. And so, as we learn to shed ourselves of that and go to a regional, ecologically based intelligence interface, an elegant agriculture. And as Paul Hawkins says, you can't run elegant systems from command central. They have to be sensitive to the region and the specific place that they are, okay? If we're going to do that, it seems impossible. In 1979, people said, you guys are totally insane. What are you doing? And the only reason we got enough energy and enough people together to actually pull off the Down Home Project and start Garden City Seeds was the faith that several professors and a few people in Missoula had in us, that actually gave us the startup capital and the pat on the back and the belief that we could really do this. We could really change the world. And now that I've been doing it for 25 years, I'm convinced we're going to do it. And our secret weapon in the end, and you can see this happening in farmers markets and in restaurants all over the United States now, we've got better tasting tomatoes. And in the end, even corporate giants will bend to that, right? We'll have a sustainable system that gives us better tasting tomatoes. And that's what it's all about. This is a positive activity to make our lives better. In the end, there's all sorts of political, even revolutionary things tied up in it, but I think it's really as simple as that. We got to come back down, find a ritualistic, simple way to ground ourselves in the planet around us, learn as much as we can from it. We're going to eat better food and enjoy each other better. We're going to have true jewels that we can pass on to our friends in our neighborhoods and to our children that are priceless, that allow us stability. And so a couple of more things about seeds that I'll just pass on to you, this magic that I've discovered in seeds. You know, it was a real romantic notion to start a seed company, and I know we're sort of poised on the idea of this seed exchange for Western Montana again. And after being in the seed business now for more than 25 years, you know, I've learned that I've had to swallow the fact that seed business is business, you know, and as I've had to try to deal with a way to make a living and to keep the thing that I've started sustainable, I've been so much involved in business. People go, oh, it's so romantic, you were seeds and all this. And I go, yeah, but I had 2 insurance company calls today, the bank, the internet's down, you know. I mean, it's this incredible amounts of other systems I've had to learn to interface with. And so as a summary, and I was saying this in another interview I did actually for Martha Stewart Living magazine last year, was that as I sit back and reflect now over all the systems and things I've had to interface with, whether it's insurance companies and distribution systems, UPS and FedEx and the post office, and the banking systems and the electronic internet systems and all the things I have to interface with, there's only one system that I know, I'm positive now, that is better than when I started. And that's the seeds themselves. We are talking about an elegantly designed system that is so much more complex and so much more mind-blowingly technological in a way than anything mankind has created up to this point, that it takes my breath away still. If you think about it, if I hold a seed up here, I mean, I can hold up a computer chip now that has 1 gigabyte of memory, right, on it. And when I went to the University of Montana in the 70s, there was not 1 gigabyte, I'm just guessing, but I'm betting, there wasn't 1 gigabyte of memory capacity in all the computers in the whole state of Montana. And now I can hold it in a little chip in my hand, right? But over here, I can hold a pumpkin seed from the Anasazi, or the Hopi Indians, that embodies 12,000 years of environmental and ecological feedback loops for a specific ecosystem, right? And it is a living embryo, it's breathing, it could probably be dormant. We're thinking now maybe for 1,000 years. They're finding some seeds in these crypts now that are at least 1,000 years old, okay? Put the chip out and see if it's still good in 1,000 years, right? So we got a seed that'll last 1,000 years, and it can self-replicate itself. Try that with a computer chip. In other words, inside of a pumpkin seed are millions of more seeds. It's all built into the system. I mean, that's technology on a level we can't. We'll never have that maybe in robotics and what we're building in the little devices that we have. And so I invite you, I guess, to get back involved in what the Anasazi knew 12,000 years ago, is that we have the ability as human beings to interface with something and dance with something that can bring us not only sustainability, but joy and magic and intellectual challenge on a level that nothing else that I've ever been able to find does. You know, we can all lose ourselves in that. There's going to be no boredom in this. Pick up Gregor Mendel's genetics and start looking at the mathematical possibilities of what you've got in one seed and how you can change that and breed it into something that's completely different. All that can be done in your own backyard by learning a few techniques. And so that just about wraps up the first part of what I want to do tonight, and why I travel so far to do this, is that I think the most important part of seed-saving workshops is opening people up to the magic and inspiring you to really do this. And this is not complicated. When I got to the Soviet Union in Siberia, they have a system called dachas, where every family has a right, or had the right, to have a summer cabin, a little teeny square place. And sometimes they're really small. And what would happen is a club would petition the government and get, say, 50 acres. And they divided them up among 500 families. And they didn't have cars, so they had little pathways. And so what it ended up being is a big community garden with little houses in it all over. And people all grew gardens. That's what they did. Flowers, tomatoes, cucumbers. Though every Siberian had those. I mean, that's a Russian national treasure. You have to do that. And every gardener I met saved all their own seeds. And you go, well, that's kind of nice. They have this nice setup, and they're not like us, right? We're busy people. These people were chemical engineers and drove buses. They were part of Novosibirsk, a city of 1.2 million people. They had a subway there. It was a modern industrial society, and they had not lost this ritual that was largely alive in the United States before World War II. Almost all family gardeners in the United States saved their own seeds. This is not a difficult thing to do. And so as I have learned about this and interface with people starting into this over the years, I've come up with what I think is an easy way to get started. Just forget about saving the world. It's agriculture in a way. Forget about saving all your own seeds in the beginning. Just save one. Just save the seeds to one thing next year, okay? And taste this magic a little bit. And if you do that, I have a suggestion. There are 5 vegetables that I suggest that people start with, okay? And the reason I suggest these is that they are self-pollinating, largely, which means that you don't have to worry about them cross-pollinating. So if you're growing tomatoes, which is one of them, you don't have to worry about what your neighbors are doing and protecting them so that you're going to get a cross between theirs and yours. They'll largely pollinate themselves before the flowers open. Okay? And the others are, besides tomatoes, are peppers, peas, beans, and lettuce. They're easy to grow. You get the seeds the first year, and they're largely self-pollinating. There are some examples of cross-pollination, but not enough to worry about when you're a beginner. So if you'll learn to save the seeds from those, and they're all easy. If you've got peas or beans, wait till the pods are dry, and you got your peas or bean seed. It's real simple. If you're growing lettuce, let one of the heads that's last to bolt in your garden go to seed, and it'll shoot up a stalk about this tall. I just saw John Cash's, a friend of mine's, the other day. And at the top, you'll start to see yellow flowers, and then that'll turn into little parachutes like dandelions have. They're actually little tin packs. And sometimes they're kind of hard to break apart. So what I've learned to do in the last few years is that I don't have to clean off the little parachutes. I don't even have to break apart the little tin packs of them. I just gather those things and plant them. And I get these little tin packs of lettuces that come up, and then I transplant them. This can be really easy stuff. If you're going to do peppers, same thing. Leave them on as long as you can. If frost is going to cut short your season, as it will in Montana lots of times before they're actually dried, pull the whole plant and shake the dirt off the root and bring it inside and hang it upside down and let the pepper dry. And pretty soon you'll have seeds rattling around in the pot, and those are your pepper seeds. Tomato seeds are a little bit more complicated, a little more elegant actually of a system, and I really this is a beautiful system. What you want to do with a fresh tomato, and what's great about it, is that you can still eat the tomato. You don't even have to give up the tomato that you get your seeds from. Be careful about which tomato you pick. Pick it from the first one, the earliest one, from the plant that you think has the best tasting. Be selective. This is your 10,000-year job, right? This is where the ritual comes in. Pick your tomato, ripe tomato, and cut it at the equator. Take the two halves and squish out all the jelly that's in between the little cavities. And the seeds will come out in that jelly. And if you do several, you get a jelly in a jar is what I usually try to get half a jar's full when I do this at once. And take that jar. If you don't get very many, you can put a little water in because you want some liquid, maybe an inch or so in there. Take that jar and set it in a warm place, uncovered, 70 degrees in your home, out of the sun for 3 days. And something happens consistently every time. A white fungus will start to form on the top of the jelly. And when you start to see the white fungus, you can stir the jelly up, and all the good seeds will settle to the bottom of the glass. All the immature or light seeds will stay up in the jelly. You can pour that stuff off, pour some water in, pour it off, pour some water in. Pretty soon you're left with clean, pure seeds at the bottom of the glass. You can strain them out, put them on a paper towel, dry them out for 3 or 4 days, and you've got your tomato seeds. It's a really simple thing. Years ago, actually, I think it's still in Stokes' catalog. I invite you to do this. Maybe they've taken this verbiage out in the last few years. I haven't looked, but for years in the Stokes catalog, if you would open it up and look in the tomato section, there was a little claim in there saying, "We treat all our tomato seeds for all known seed-borne diseases." And they put that in there for commercial agriculture because they don't want to buy diseases and plant them in their fields. And that's a great thing, and that's a great service. What used to get me is that white fungus and this process of the jelly breaking down treats all tomato seeds for all known seed-borne diseases. It's a part of the natural process of a tomato rotting. If you think about it, if no one was there, the tomato would fall. It would be warm and moist, sitting on the ground for the rest of the summer. Well, why don't those seeds just sprout? They're warm and moist. That's what seeds need. Well, that jelly around them keeps them from germinating. That's a system it has, so that it won't germinate right away. And the fungus that's co-evolved with it is right there and starts to break it down. And in that process, all the diseases are killed. The fungus is antibiotic and treats the seeds, and then so you get the seeds in the end. And so it's just one of those magical, natural things that we're waking up to and learning about the system around us that really is more magical, I think, than we give it credit in lots of cases. So anyway, I came here to inspire you, came here to at least open the door and give you the first steps towards saving seeds. I sell about 200 different varieties of vegetables, about 100 different varieties of wildflowers and native grasses. Sort of over the years, I've been pulled into that business as people wake up to their natural environment and want to do things in a more intelligent way. And I collect seeds for about 50 different kinds of wildflowers as well as some native grasses. So I have a lot of experience doing that. I had hoped to bring some slides to show you some pictures of actually and some techniques on how to do that, but I was separated in the car breakdown from my slideshow and from the samples I have. And so what I think I'll do is just answer questions that you guys might have about how to do this, or individual garden questions about your own particular backyards or whatever, or global questions about the Terminator gene or those sorts of things, because this battle of big companies taking over, and dominating and now owning the genetics of the planet is really a serious issue, and that needs to be discussed, and we all have to be aware of what's going along those lines. I had the pleasure or the curse, I guess, of being asked to debate the CEO of the world's largest seed company at the time. It was Novartis Seeds, on Idaho Public Television 3 years ago over the Terminator gene and the centralization of the seed industry. And I learned a lot. in that process about what these guys are thinking about as they march into this whole new world of science fiction is really what it is. And so if you have interest in that, I can talk about that also. So.
Well, I actually have a few questions before we entirely open it up. I would like to know, how much have you worked with farmers in your life, and how receptive are they to sharing their seed, and how much do they really understand about seed saving? Are there a lot of farmers who are still saving their seed, or are they intimidated by these large companies?
Good question. One of the, our legal system is based on precedents. What happens is a court case is settled and a precedent will be set. And from those precedents, society will evolve and new court cases will happen. There'll be new disputes, new ways of looking at things, a new decision and a new precedent. And so we're left with this whole body of law that helps regulate us, especially in our agriculture. Well, one of the precedents, it's really a beautiful one that has come through from English common law before about the time the first nation states actually were starting to get formulated, way back in Europe, and the tradition that then we brought to America, and when we formed our Constitution and we took ideas that had been in place and we started to set up our legal system, and then we've had statutes and we've had precedents since then. One of the clear lines that have come through all that whole system was that every farmer always has the right to save their own seeds from the crops that they grow and to plant them again. And I think that comes from the understanding a long time ago of just how important this 10,000-year-old ritual that I was talking about is. And so that understanding about farmers saving seeds is actually more alive and more durable and even more used than I thought was possible as I got into this. It's true that most farmers now grow hybrids, patented hybrids from the big companies, and the amount of diversity in the crops that they grow has been widely narrowed. But there are still a lot of family farmers in the United States that still depend on saving some of their own seed from their own crops to grow the next year. And so they're really aware. I would say that much more than I had thought possible. Your question, though, opens up one other thing that I would like to say about it. Recently, the first nation state in the history of the planet has implemented a rule making it illegal for its farmers to do that. Does anybody know which one it is? Iraq. Iraq is the first nation ever to have in its constitution a law that says farmers are not able to save their own seeds. That is not a right that farmers have in this country. And it was done during our occupation and the central authority that we set up with the language was actually written up, and it was done from these huge new gene giants, as we call them, seed companies that are in there with the U.S. government that are trying to set up the system of the future. We're seeing some of this, even though farmers are still able to save their own seeds. The practical end of it is coming with the new Terminator gene technology. They own and control with chemicals the right for plants to reproduce. So that actually what they're going to do is not allow the genetics of reproduction to be passed on in the farmer's next crop unless they spray a chemical that they buy from Monsanto or one of these other companies that turns the gene back on. That's what the Terminator gene is a general term for, is that scientists now have the ability to turn off and on genetic coding in plants by spraying chemicals. And so practically we're starting to see that in some crops. And then also Monsanto's moved to licensing its Roundup Ready crops, which are the largest body of genetically modified crops used in North America now. And so if there is drift from the farm next door of Roundup Ready soybeans into your crop, and you save those seeds and try to plant them, then you are violating a licensing agreement with Monsanto, even though you never bought them in the first place. And they are taking those farmers to court, and there have been several court cases lately where they have won. In fact, one made it to the Canadian Supreme Court. So if you think about those sorts of things, maybe practically, without there being statutes, this law that has allowed farmers since we remember to save their own seeds is actually, that this ritual, corporate agriculture, industrial agriculture is trying to bring to a close. They want to control that process also. Long answer to a short question.
Oh, that's great. So it is really evident that it's important to be saving our own seed. And I'm just wondering, what kind of conditions do people need to save their seeds? Does it have to be cool and dry? Do you need a big space to save seed? How does that work?
You know, when people say, how do you save seeds? I always say, big, nice, easy question, but 10,000 answers. It depends on where you are and what you're trying to grow. Techniques for saving seeds, though, are widespread all over the world, in every climate. And so it's just a matter of tapping back into the folk wisdom almost that was in those places. If you're looking for sources of information, if you want to deepen your walk into this ritual, we're really lucky to have a book called Seed to Seed that was published by the Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. And they got Susan Ashworth, whose father was actually one of the great corn geneticists in this country around World War II and afterwards. 3 or 4 of his hybrid lines are the basis of almost all the sweet corn grown in the world. And so the daughter of one of these great industrial geneticists is actually dedicated herself to this project that we have of redefining a new sustainable agriculture with diversity. And she took all of the techniques that had been rediscovered and retested in the Seed Savers Exchange, which are small gardeners and farmers throughout North America that are starting to save seeds again. And she took all their techniques and put them into one book. And so it's really a treasure trove of information that would help you answer your questions. Now, that doesn't help it for farmers a lot. And we have another great source of information about this. Actually, there's several that are starting to happen just in the last few years in the United States. Abundant Life Seed Foundation, which was a small regional seed company like Garden City started, and we were both nonprofits at the time. Their actual seed building burned down a couple years ago. It got caught in a fire in downtown Port Townsend. And so they saved some of the seeds, but it gave them a chance to reconstitute themselves. And so instead of doing what they'd been doing, they actually sold the seed part, and it's being run by Territorial Seeds. So all those varieties are still available. And the nonprofit went on to start an organization that was dedicated to education of organic seed production and saving on small-scale agricultural level. And so they're a great, it's called the Organic Seed Network, I think is what it's called. And they're still out of Port Townsend. And John Navazio, PhD in plant genetics, is really the educational powerhouse behind that. And they have annual workshops. I think this year's is going to be at McMiniman's Lodge in just outside of Portland, Oregon. And what happens is all the small-scale seed producers and farmers that want to learn how to do this come together every year now in the western United States at this gathering. And they put on very technical, very informative, and very practical workshops on how to re-engage in this process. And because John's involved, it's not only in how to save seeds, but his whole focus is saving seeds to disease resistance in your area. And so he'll teach you how to set up parameters. And it might be instructive for me to give you one example. I saw some slides of some cabbage trials they did actually in western Montana. And they were having huge amounts of trouble with cabbage loopers, and there was something else that was getting into their cabbage. And they planted a whole field, it was a whole acre of this heirloom cabbage. And they ended up saving the seeds from 2 varieties that were actually resistant to everything that had happened in that field. And so they maybe had 250,000 plants, and with all sorts of genetic diversity going, and 2 of those plants had what they were looking for. And so they, plowed under everything else and took the stuff from those 2, and that became then the basis for a cabbage crop in this area that is resistant to all the pests that were attacking it. And so not only are they saving seeds, these guys are actually working on, disease resistance for sustainability. That's the advantage, I guess, to using open pollinated seeds and learning seed saving gives to your local agriculture. So.
Great. Well, Bill, here in Missoula, there's a group that's forming, that's calling themselves the Montana Seed Savers Network, and their goal is to get a seed network of vegetable and grains and other types of food crops. And we're just wondering, do you have some advice for us on how to start a network here in Missoula? What kind of things do we need to think about? Who are partners that we should look at working with and that sort of thing?
If I were here doing it, the first thing I would do is right now, this fall, advertise a seed exchange party. I would advertise it widely over western Montana, and I would invite everyone who has anything that's open pollinated, whether it was their grandmother's in a can in the garage, or whether it was theirs from this year, to bring them and show them off. Show us your stuff. Give them a place for all that vanity I was talking about. Bring your treasures in, and horse trade with us. Simple. Let a big room, potluck dinner, or whatever, and let everyone. I saw this happen in Siberia, and that was the basis of their whole network. Was this one annual event where everybody, hey, I need cantaloupes over here, or has anybody gotten any of Dima's cantaloupe seeds? He seems to be really tight with them this year, All that kind of discussion took place. And what I think will come out of that are the resources you'll need to continue, that you'll find that there'll be individuals that are willing to step forth and to do the other kinds of work. Eventually it would be nice to align yourself with a botanical garden or a historical society or somewhere, so that you could actually have someone to grow out the things the way they do at the Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa, that maybe aren't being grown out by everybody, or things that are new that are given to you guys that might work real well within your network, but they just need a kickstart. So you might, you'll need a place, and you'll need resources to be able to do that.
Can you explain what you mean by open pollinated seed?
Open pollinated is a botanical term to describe higher order flowering plants that, for the most part, breed true. In other words, if you save seeds from the parents and plant them, you will get something close to the parents. There'll be genetic diversity in there, but you're generally getting what the parents were. The clearest way to understand this is as opposed to what we call F1 hybrids. And you'll see that there's a federal law that says when you look in a seed catalog, if you are selling a hybrid, you have to put a notation and tell people that it's an F1 hybrid. Okay, and you'll see F1 sometimes as a short notation behind a vegetable variety's name in a catalog. Now, they won't say hybrid, but they'll say F1. What that means is F is short for filial. Filial is offspring. 1 is a botanical demarcation for first generation. So what you're getting when you get a hybrid is you are getting the first generation offspring from 2 plants that were distinct genetically, that were crossed. And so when you get their offspring, they hold the genetics to both parents. And in the first generation, you can get hybrid vigor, which is often touted in modern agriculture. In other words, plants grow really well because there's all sorts of diversity in them. And you can get specific characteristics if you've bred for that. Things like bush cucumbers are a great modern outcome of breeding bushes that didn't have any cucumbers on them at all, and vining cucumbers that had long vines but had great cucumbers, and they crossed them, and they got an F1 hybrid in that first generation that's a bush cucumber. Now, if you take the seeds out of those cucumbers, the F2s, and plant them, you won't get bush cucumbers. You'll get a bunch of vines, and you'll get a bunch of bushes, and you may get cucumbers on one or the other, but you really, very small percentage of those will be like the parents. And that's the difference between F1 hybrid seeds if you save them from an F1 hybrid, and seeds if you save them from an open pollinated variety. Now, as John Schneeberger, who ran Garden City Seeds for a lot of years, used to say, that doesn't mean that we can't save seeds from hybrids. And in fact, we probably should. Because lots of the hybrids that we have now since World War II have had a huge amount of genetic work done on them. Disease resistance, sizes, characteristics that we really like. One I can think of in particular in peppers is there's a hybrid line of peppers now that don't drop their blossoms in really cold weather. So you can grow peppers at 33 degrees just so they don't freeze and still get peppers. I mean, that's for Montana, that's fabulous. You won't find that in an open pollinated variety. So maybe we should save them from hybrids. And what will happen then, and I know because we're going through this process right now, is that we save the seeds from the F2s of this ACE1 F1 hybrid pepper. And we planted them out. And did we find any ACE F1 peppers growing in there? We had one plant out of about 300. Okay? We got little red hot peppers. We got big, almost football-sized white sweet peppers. We got and everything in between, every color, size, shape, the diversity behind that hybrid was incredible. And so Joanne Robbins, a PhD plant geneticist in Idaho, was helping me. We saved all the seeds from this one, F1, or the F2 generation that looked like the original parent. And we planted those out. And the next year we got about, I think it was about 12% of the plants had those characteristics. Save those. Plant them out again. And you'll find this with most hybrids is that in about 8 generations, you can stabilize them. All this hybrid stuff that we have, all the patented material in the world, we can have back if we'll just do the work. All right? We can make those open pollinated again. And so this is great fun. You know, if you're sort of an anti-big business kind of guy like me, like I was coming out of philosophy school here, wow, what a great idea. Let's take all their stuff and give it back to ourselves. So they're going to own and control it. We're saving and passing around seeds in our seeds exchanges. How are they even going to know? We don't have to buy it from them anymore. It's a great idea. And that leads me to say one more exciting thing to you is that if you think about it for tomatoes, tomatoes self-pollinate. I was saying that before. So how do you get hybrid tomatoes? How do you get an early girl tomato? Well, it takes a lot of work. You have to be there within hours of the formation of the flower. You have to pull the cone off the top. There's a little cone in the middle of a tomato. You have to pull the cone off, which has all the anthers and the pollen, before the stigma and style open, okay? And then you have to take a paintbrush with the pollen from the tomato that you want, and you have to hand pollinate it. So each tomato needs to be hand pollinated. Well, where's this done? Asia. How much do we pay people? About $1 a day in Thailand. You're actually, when you buy hybrid tomato seeds, you're actually partaking in slave labor system to get those hybrid tomatoes. So the question becomes, Early Girl's been around for 25 years, hybrid, why wouldn't those guys stabilize the line? Take them 8 years if they did it every summer. Take them 4 years if they have greenhouses. Then all they have to do is save the seeds from the Early Girl, it's stabilized, and sell those.
Yeah,
Wow.
then anybody can save it.
Then anyone could save it. Well, guess what? They did that. And what we're finding out is almost all the older and established hybrid tomatoes for sale in the United States are actually open pollinated. And they don't tell you that because nobody will buy them anymore. They've got everyone, it's perfect marketing. They've got everyone thinking that they have to buy all their seeds every year when actually you don't. And Early Girl was the first one we found. And now there's reports of several others. And so I invite you to get back in the queue with us and let's discover what we already own again as we start to do this adventure. And it's exciting.
Great. Well, thank you. And I think we should definitely open it up to questions from the audience if you all have some things that you'd like to ask Bill about seeds.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if at any of these seed exchange, seed saving networks are large enough and are focusing on producing seeds for the larger commodity scale growers, specifically soybean and corn. Because right now, most conventional growers can't access non-number ready soybeans. Their seed dealers don't even carry it.
Right, exactly.
I'm wondering if, obviously this isn't an answer, but I'm wondering if you feel foresee this is really happening down the road if this can really provide alternatives at that scale.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's difficult.
No, it's not. The first one was wheat. And CUSA Foundation in Ojai, California took on that job about 15 years ago to find all the varieties of wheat that would be good for North American farmers, try to keep that diversity, go through selections, and try to contract farmers to keep them growing. And there's talk on a national scale of seed co-ops where farmers could buy their seeds. And the idea, the last time I was with a group on a panel with John Navazio and Gary Nabham and others, what we talked about was that in order for a farmer to join this co-op and be able to have access to all of these seeds, they would have to grow a seed crop. That was your ticket in, okay? And then the co-op itself would say, okay, we need about 35,000 pounds of this. And we've got 50 new farmers that want to be part of the co-op. We'll divvy out the foundation seed to those people so that they can grow it out. And when they bring it back, we'll credit them for the dollar amount that it's worth. But then because they're part of the process in supplying, then they can buy the soybeans and all the other things that are available for the co-op. So that model is starting to be talked about for the other large crops. There are several organic and sustainable farmers organizations in the United States now with thousands of farmers in them. And they're very well organized and very sophisticated. And these problems are being addressed. And I just haven't been. The one on the West Coast every year is called Eco Farm. And it takes place at Monterey at Silmar every end of January every year. And I was there, the last time I was there was like 8 years ago, and there were 1,200. I hear now there's almost 10,000 farmers that come to that. This is becoming big business, and there's a very serious push behind this. And so, I would contact this Organic Seed Network. John Navazio, he's central to it. I just don't deal in seeds on that level yet. And so, but there are, people are addressing that, and it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think it's also important for the education component of the seed study to remind growers who feel stuck in the system, to be reminded that they don't need to be relying so much on these off-farm inputs, and that seeds didn't used to cost as much. And the liability, this unprecedented liability of cross-contamination, where you're buying conventional non-genetically engineered seeds, yet half the time it's going to contain transgenic traits, is frightening. And so,
it's incredible.
And, extending that conversation so that people know.
Definitely.
And furthermore, let me just say one more thing. In the last 6 months, I've been getting emails from a new organization in the southeastern United States that got grant money from Kellogg or a huge foundation, Pew maybe, and their mission is to do exactly what you said, to educate farmers to produce their own seeds again. And they're holding workshops and educational sessions all over the eastern United States this year at large scale convention and workshop level gatherings. And so that's new evidence of a response to what you're talking about. So it's really exciting, actually, to see what's happening. That's fine. And I'd like to just make one other comment. I was about the transgenic. Those are genetically modified crops. And the United States has the largest amount of them of any country. And it's becoming a very serious problem. And it hit me personally when I got a call from an organic farm in California for corn seed. And easy, open pollinated corn. I've been carrying varieties for years. But they wanted guaranteed that it had not been contaminated with transgenic corn. And I'm going, well, that shouldn't be too hard. And so I started calling around. And there is no corn seed for sale in North America now that is guaranteed not to be contaminated, which is really a frightening thing. And if you think about the experiment, I am not an absolutist when it comes to no genetic modification. It's an interesting tool. I do know that in the hands of short-term profit-motivated chemical companies, it's a bad idea because most of the genetically modified crops have been modified to allow the spraying of more chemicals. I mean, which sort of makes sense within the logic of their worlds. But maybe at some point, with the right kind of testing, and there's a Russian scientist that can't get funding that's working on salt tolerance so that we could grow wheat on the beach and use seawater. So that is potentially possible with genetically modified crops. And so whether or not we should do that, we need the counsel of the white-haired masters to think about it long and hard for generations maybe before we proceed. But I'm not, categorically against it at this point. But if you're going to start an experiment using genetically modified crops, don't use an outcrossing wind-pollinated crop. That just doesn't make any sense. Corn is the last crop humanity should have used to try this experiment because it is everywhere. No way to contain those little pollen grains of corn. They're all over North. In fact, they found the pollution in the genetic center for wheat in the Mayan culture. That they're finding genetically modified corn grains down there. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. What you say is a huge problem.
My other question is, what role do you see the land-grant universities playing in this? Because so much of the research now is funded by the companies.
Right.
Looking for these short-term profits. And I'm just wondering, they used to provide more for farmers who were interested in systems that didn't depend so much on off-farm inputs.
Right.
And I wonder if you have an opinion on that.
It's the corporate state. And along with that corporatization of our society in the last 25 years especially has been the land-grant universities. They're almost completely and totally controlled by the same chemical and pharmaceutical companies, the research and the dollars for them that are causing most of the problems. That's just my opinion. There is room in them. There's still latitude in universities, and there's some very beautiful things being done from time to time. I get calls from Cornell University is doing things. One of my favorite people in the whole world after I started Garden City Seeds is Dr. James Baggett at Oregon State University, who did Oregon sugar pod peas and Oregon spring tomatoes. And those are the traditional land-grant university resources, developing new varieties that were good for his region, that were open pollinated, that were not patented, that were released to the public domain. But those were because that's what he believed personally. That wasn't because of anything set up in the university, and he's now retired, and so Oregon State doesn't do that anymore. So the potential is there, but right now that's not happening, and that's why you're seeing these independent organizations that are taking on these jobs, like the Organic Seed Network and this new organization in the Southeast, and if I can think of its name, I'll pass that on to you. So right now that's where the action is. And there's actually some federal money coming through SARE, the SARE grants, that is being funded into that. Because it's frankly a United States Defense Department problem. We are not a defendable nation at this point when we're not only importing the oil that it takes to run our agriculture, but the genetic diversity to keep it alive. And that's been recognized at rather high levels in long-term planning. And so it's really interesting. Never say never, never generalize overall, about it, that it's all the enemy and it's all dark inside there, because it's not. But by and large, the real open field running and the real touchdowns are being scored by people outside of that whole system now.
We can take a couple more questions. Anyone has any?
Yeah.
Do you see the very little that I know about bees, but I know that the whole existence of bees and how they are migrating and pollinating and things is changing a great deal. Do you see that having any impact on where you're coming from?
Oh yeah, that may be the Achilles heel. Was we're all focusing on soil and pesticides and other things. The time with the bees is just unbelievable. If you think about how much work humanity's going to have to try to come up with to run an agriculture that's sustainable if we don't have bees, and they're seriously threatened. We're spraying billions, count it, billions of gallons of herbicides and pesticides in this country every year. And it's having a tremendous effect on that whole system, which is rather fragile, at least at this point. That doesn't mean that we won't get pesticide-resistant varieties at some point and that it won't come back. The system's always been more resilient than we think, but I've had the pleasure of being with the woman who is heading up the national organization that's most, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, because they're also involved with butterflies. And it's really scary what's going on in along those lines. And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens. As Paul Hawkins says, what's happening is that as we have seen a lot of humanity's energy centralized into this huge industrial, I call it a storm, that's really only been here on an extreme level since World War II. E.O. Wilson, actually, I saw last year in Boise, the great biologist, maybe our greatest living biologist on the planet, was saying that if we stopped everything we're doing that's industrially, that's harming the environment right now, we're still going to lose maybe half the biodiversity on the planet. Okay? I mean, we're talking about a huge disruption in this system that we've developed and that we're all a part of. And no matter what any of us do, and whatever pipe dreams I might have of saving seeds into some sustainable sunset future, we are going to be the part of the death of most of the different kinds of things that we see around us. And it may just be that our greatest job is finding these things that are dying like bees and trying to save as much of them as we can and shepherding them as they pass from us. And that's really, that reality, I think, is something that we all need to be looking at as what we're going to live our lives out doing. Because, even if we stop the carbon dioxides, right, the emissions, we've got 100 years worth of global warming to contend with on an upscale anyway now, even if we stopped everything today. I mean, it's huge inertia toward destruction at this point. And I think bees are just a real big part of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bill, very much for enlightening us on this really important issue. And I'd just like to tell the audience, too, that the Montana Seed Saver Network is just getting started. And so if you're interested in being a part of it, if you're interested in being a volunteer to help grow out any seed or to help store some of the seeds, we're looking for people to do that. We also need people to be collecting data on what seed varieties exist and helping to enter that data in a database. And if you'd like to know more and get involved, there has been a sheet of paper going around that you can put your information on so we can contact you. And you can also go to our website at the Missoula Urban Demonstration Project, which is www.mudproject.org, to find out what you need to know there. I also wanted to let you know that there is an organization in the Bitterroot called Sustainable Living Systems that is already saving seed, and they have quite a large seed bank just from farmers and gardeners in the Bitterroot, and they already have thousands of varieties.
Great.
And so that's a really great thing, and they're willing to collaborate openly with us and share ideas that they have and share seeds that they have. And so at this point, I'd just like to thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Bill. And
if you want to get in touch with me, Bill McDorman, my seed company is called Seeds Trust, and I'm on the web at seedstrust.com. And I years ago started a nonprofit called the International Seed Saving Institute, and its website is seedsave.org. And if you go there, you'll find all sorts of information about how to save seeds, practical seed saving information. About half of a book I wrote called Basic Seed Saving is online there for free. You can download the information, you can look at it, or whatever. There's links to other sorts of organizations and things happening in this field, so you can find me that way also. So I hope that should pretty much do it.